Hello, my name is Mohammed Wali and I work as Solutions Architect at AWS. In this video, I'll demonstrate how you can run your PowerShell scripts on AWS Lambda, enabling you to harness the power and scalability of serverless computing for your PowerShell-based workloads. So join me in this video as we explore the possibilities of running PowerShell on AWS Lambda and unlock a new level of flexibility and efficiency in your automation workflows. With that said, let's navigate to the AWS Lambda console, where I'm just going to go ahead and create a new function. Let's call it PowerShell Lambda Demo 1. And for runtime, I just going to scroll all the way down to provide your own Bootstrap on Amazon Linux 2, which is a custom runtime. And then I'm going to create a function. So what this simply would do is it would just go ahead and create a Lambda function, a vanilla one, with just Amazon Linux 2 under the hood. So once this function is created, I need to populate it with a layer that would contain the PowerShell binaries needed in order to execute PowerShell on AWS Lambda. Therefore, I'll scroll all the way down to the layer section. That's where I'm going to choose custom layer, and I'm going to choose a PowerShell runtime layer and then its version and click on add. What I have done before the recording is I have just gone ahead and created this layer already, but later on in this video I will show you how to do so. So with that, now we have the layer. I think we're ready to create our PowerShell script in Lambda. So I'll just clean up these unneeded files, and then I'm gonna go ahead and create a new one, which would be my PowerShell script.piece1. And within this file, I'll just create this PowerShell function, which is simply all it's going to do is hello from Lambda, and it's going to give me back the event object, which is going to send that as a response eventually. So once we are done with the function, writing our code, I'm just going to deploy it. But before moving any further, I need to update the Lambda function handler as well to match the PowerShell script name and potentially the function I would like to execute within this script. So I will scroll down to the runtime settings section, where I'm going to edit it to change the handler to the script name, which is PowerShell script.piece1, and I would like to execute this function only, which is called handler, within this PowerShell script, and then I'm going to save it. So now I think we are ready to execute our function, but let's go to configuration and do one last change before executing it, and just give the memory a bit of extra memory and increase the timeout to 5 or 7, and then just save it. So this would just give it a bit of more resources to execute a bit faster. And now I'm ready to test out this PowerShell on Lambda, and for which I'm going to go ahead and create a new test event. Let's call it test. And this is the event JSON that would be passed as a Lambda input in this case, which would be stored in the Lambda input variable. And now if I try to test it, to start to execute the PowerShell script, and what I should expect as a result is simply hello from Lambda with and the Lambda input value, which in this case was the event JSON. So that's how easy it is really to just run PowerShell on top of AWS Lambda. But earlier on I added a layer. How can I create this PowerShell runtime layer? So for that you need to navigate to this GitHub repo, which is the AWS Lambda PowerShell runtime, which we made it publicly available last year. And this is the one you can build the PowerShell custom runtime out of it. So in order to get this custom runtime or deploy the layer for the PowerShell custom runtime, just clone the repo and open it with one of your IDEs, and then navigate to the examples folder and then the demo runtime layer function. And that's where we're going to use SAM to build a serverless application out of it. So this application with this SAM template is actually, as you see here, what's going to do is it's just going to go ahead and create a Lambda function with a couple of layers attached to it. These layers, one of them is a PowerShell runtime layer, so it's going to create a PowerShell runtime layer, and the other one is a demo AWS tool layer, which would create the layer that has AWS tools for PowerShell for you if you would like to execute any PowerShell commandlets against AWS as well. So this function, part of the code that would be running it, is simply trying to retrieve the AWS regions. So it's using actually a commandlet from the AWS tools for PowerShell. So let's start off by building this application using SAM build -- parallel. And once the application is built, now you are good to go either to deploy it or maybe even to test it locally, which would make it way better to make sure that the result you are expecting is exactly what you're getting before deploying it to your environment. For which I'm gonna run some local invoke, which would just test the application locally, and now I should be expecting the output of this function that uses these couple of layers, which are AWS tools layer as well as the PowerShell runtime layer, and simply I should expect the AWS region, which are all returned in JSON as you see here. So I'm getting the region code names as well as a name, and if shell is default on it or not. So it seems to be working perfectly fine. That's what I expected. The next step is now I'm ready to deploy. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use or run sam deploy-g to give me a bit of a guided step-by-step guide. So now I need to define the CloudFormation stack name for this SAM application, which could be Lambda PowerShell demo, and then I need to specify the region, which could be EU West 1, and then I just need to term the list of the requests, and from there it would just go ahead and start the deployment part. And now finally I just need to confirm that I would like to deploy this, change set, and would just go ahead and deploy the CloudFormation template that would form the SAM application. Once the deployment is done, I think now you can just navigate to the AWS Management Console in your EU West 1 region or whatever region you choose. And under layers section, you would be able to see that a couple of new layers has been created and one Lambda function has been created as well. And if we open this function, you would see that the 2 layers has been added to it. And if we open the code of this function, you see that it's just trying to retrieve the AWS region, which was output we retrieved locally. And if I just try to test it out to verify that everything's working quite fine and just run a test, I should be able to say pretty much all of the AWS regions retrieved as a response here, which is exactly what I'm getting now. With that, I really would like to thank you for watching, and I hope you found it informative.